What's up guys, it's Michael here. In this video, we're going to talk about what has the federal government do to curb inflation. So, as you know, for this month of March, the report came out showing that they raised interest rates again by another 0.25%. So a lot of people speculate it's going to go up. And now they're speculating, are they going to pivot? But here's the interesting part. Since they're trying to fight inflation, Senator Warren came out, and I quote, that she is saying that Jerome Powell is not doing his job by fighting inflation. He's only fighting inflation only, and he's hurting American citizens by basically raising unemployment rate, destroying businesses, and destroying the economy. But what is really interesting is when you listen to politicians in mainstream media, it's usually a half truth and half lie. In her case, she's partially correct. But what actually happened is the federal government printed too much money and kept interest rates way too low for a really long duration period of time. For example, before the pre-pandemic, it was pretty much stable. Everyone expected it's going to happen. And when 2020 hit, then everyone started spending like crazy and started buying up everything for the pandemic. And during that time, the interest rates were basically close to nothing. It's almost free, like other countries like Japan and Switzerland. In those cases, those run a different economy, but they're pretty much stagnated. They're not as much as a consumer economy as the United States. But the interesting part is they kept it so low for so long, and it caused basically what happened today, inflation, which they should have started steadily raising it when they noticed what was going on in 2020. But it is what it is. Some people say it's done deliberately, and some people say they're trying to fix it. As for me, it's just, whatever happened already happened. If there was a time machine, definitely go back and change it, but too bad. This is reality. There's no time machine. That's why you guys should click the subscribe button down below and the like button so you can get this video out to more people. So going back to how is this gonna help our current situation is, first, this has been happening over and over again for many generations. Like for example, 2008, then you have the dot-com bubble crash, then you have basically Japan's economy crashing too. And at the end, it hasn't really much changed. But what can change during the next decade or so is how the economy will try to fend itself off and give itself a soft landing. Meaning is, instead of having a hard landing where inflation goes out of the roof and interest rates continue going up, maybe now we can start actually answering some of the problems. For example, why is inflation so high? It's because, first of all, you got products are being bought up, so a lot of people are raising prices. You got supply chain issues, because you rely on many other countries to get their products. And that I'll get more in depth into it, because there's a reason why globalization helped normalize a lot of things. At the same time is, you can't just rely on another place too much, because if something happens, then for example 2020, then you're missing a whole entire product line. And for example, everyone's buying food and suddenly you lost that specific type of item that's being imported from another country, and you produce in your own country but not enough, then when people want it, they're gonna buy. They don't care. They're just gonna buy. For example, like my upcoming video, when I need a vehicle, I'm gonna buy another vehicle because I need to get to work, which applies for most people working in America, because of public transportation here is basically non-existent. But back to topic is, what can they do? So first, raising interest rates, hurt the economy, try to bring inflation down so people stop spending. And I mentioned other video, or what they can do, which I don't understand why they don't do it, is instead of always raising interest rates higher, why don't you increase productivity? In this case, meaning bring jobs back to America. Like our previous president said that, bring jobs back to America, but his plan is only partial of the equation, never answered everything. Meaning is, how are you going to bring people coming back to here? First, you're competing against places that have wages are basically worth nothing over here, because you can't afford making 5 cents an hour to live here. And number two is, over there, people are willing to work. Over here, people are not willing to work in the United States for that amount of price or for what they're getting, because they can't pay for their products and service. And since number three, we are a consumer economy, meaning is everyone likes to buy stuff. Everyone has a really high standard of living compared to other places. So what's the problem to solve it? So first, you got to look at one thing, NAFTA. NAFTA, which has been talked about in the past by our previous president and our current president, a little bit about it, but the interesting is they're trying to find another country to replace China, which is supposed to be Mexico, but Mexico can only do so much. But I think the best thing which they could do is partner up with Japan, maybe have an agreement deal signed with them, similar to NAFTA, a free trade agreement deal with Japan. Because why I say Japan? Here's the more interesting thing: Japan was one of the most modern economies, but at the same time, is their population is shrinking, meaning a lot of people are dying. They're not having children. So basically, their workforce is plummeting. And a lot of people are not producing goods, and instead they're consuming goods and not making more new things. And which is really interesting is they're going to be the first one to enter that phase and the first one to get out. But when the first one to get out, that is basically the main part right there. When they get out, how they're going to get out, that is the question. What they're investing is on AI technology, anything that replaces people for work, and they're going to take over really small jobs. Basically, work that people don't want to do. For example, farming, agricultural. You can basically do manufacturing, all the small stuff that can be replaced by machines. And yes, he said people are losing work, but because people are losing work because no one wants to do that job. That's why we offshore it to other countries. And you're looking at how does it relate back to inflation. Instead of having all the stuff you produce in another country, just in case something happens, like the war in Ukraine or the deal with China, then you can have it all bring back to here. So that's actually part of the equation, the answer to that equation. First, you have more automatic AI technology. Invest more heavily in there. That's one. Number two, you still need the materials. So the materials, when you get the materials over here, you got to remember the materials are in like rock or powder form. In this case, is mining industry. Like for example, let's use Tesla car batteries. It doesn't come in that package. It comes in a rock, a powder form, and a liquid form. So when it comes in, it has to be something called refined. Where is the refinement coming from? Coming from other countries that is basically not based in the US. For example, most refineries go to China. Most of the oil and gas is produced by Russia and the Middle East. So if you want to curb this type of problem, you have to build it back at home. Instead of offshoring all of it, start having built over here. Back in the States or back in Europe or back in the country that's basically having this inflation problem. Now, how does it relate back to inflation is you have to provide incentives to incentivize them to basically start that business. So looking back at the United States case is because you look at the big corporations have a lot of tax breaks to the point it's pretty ridiculous, and I can't cover all of it because there's so much of it to the point is even I made like an hour-long video, I can't list it all because they can go to gray zones that most of us cannot. Even business owners such as myself, medium size to small size, can't even touch that level. Because once you hit to that level, when you're making over like $10 million or more, and you start having businesses out of the country, that's when they can all touch all the gray zones area. Yeah, you can say you can do it around $1 million, but it really depends on the business. But usually around 10 million or more, you can start touching gray zones. And after working with CPAs and when they show what they show me, it makes a lot of sense. So what needs to happen is to curb inflation, besides what I listed those two things earlier: bring production back, bring refineries back, bring materials back, bring especially automation back. Is the main part is start making laws and making tax laws incentivizing small businesses. That's the most biggest deal. Small businesses are the ones that get hurt the most during inflation because we cannot get workers, which I've seen already, and I'm pretty sure everyone watching this video and subscribe to me understand that a lot of small businesses have closed down because you can't find workers, you can't find people consuming over there. Number two is, besides giving them tax incentives for small businesses, you got to encourage them to open more businesses, meaning having people from school or in college do startups, like similar to Silicon Valley, like what Texas is going through, having people move, all tech people moving here, and also in the same time, maybe have education, incentivize people to create new businesses, startups. So instead of going to college, completing your courses, getting a bachelor's degree, maybe going to master's or doctorate, maybe give them an opportunity to make business and starting up a business as a standard mandatory class. So maybe incentivize them to create a new business for whatever field they go into. And when you have more businesses competing, that lowers down prices. That also drops inflation too, because you have more people producing products, they're going to lower prices. And if supply and demand matches, that's when it stays stable. But you have more supply and less demand, in this case, that's when prices start to decrease. That is pretty much simple. Even Clear Value, Brian, he mentions the same thing. Productivity. Productivity is basically, no one really talks about it, sadly, because no one wants to answer the question is, why is inflation so high? Raising interest rates is one way. Other people like Senator Warren says, oh, like we shouldn't raise interest rates. You're hurting the economy. But the interesting part, she never ever gives a solution. The same goes for all politicians. They never ever give a solution, and when they do give a solution, it usually revolves around the party that they're trying to attack. So this is like perfect example how you guys can fight inflation by starting new businesses, doing new startups, and sadly the incentives coming in is really not great. It's usually meant for the big corporations. For example, another example I can give before I want to end this video, look at big pharma. So the only one that's really competing against pharmaceutical drugs is technically Mark Cuban. Like other companies are competing, but they're not big enough name that people like me would notice, would know, unless I go on and do my own research. Only like Mark Cuban's going against them. Another billionaire is going against a multi-hundred trillionaire company. That's at this point it's unbeatable unless you have better incentives to have people to lower cost of drugs. Like for example, why we adopt Canada model. Maybe an inflation of drugs will go down. It doesn't work like that here. Unfortunately, even if it did adopt a model, you still have a lot of backdoors for incentives for people not to mass produce that type of drug to save lives. Now, one I have to mention is agriculture. Like for example, Senator Warren, I quote, says that a lot of people do price gouging, and this includes the food industry. She is partially correct because food industry is monopolized by big corporations, and at the same time, it's actually part of the government's fault too because a lot of land that are actually leased out to farmers, and they have a hard time making that money back if no one's buying that food, or they sell it to another third party, and that third party sells it out, then all the money making is going to a third party. So if you cut out the third party and you have the farmer own the land and help them, incentivize them to help them sell their products in mass market, like for example, Alibaba was one of them, help them mass marketing products until, well, the person disappeared, owner of it disappeared, and well, that's another case in the story. But in that case, America, or someone in America, could theoretically make a website like that. Like e-commerce for maybe farmers, for maybe different types of industries. And at the same time, the government has to step in, provide incentives for small and medium business owners. And I think within this decade, we'll maybe see this change. Because I think people are finally getting fed up that big corporations basically run the show. And the government are doing the same thing they've been doing for the past 50 years. The economy goes to crap, raise interest rates. If the economy's doing well, we'll just keep printing money until something goes wrong. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please click the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time when I update you on my new vehicle that's coming in. Peace.